Tonight's tale is called The Winter That Would Not End. It is a story from the American frontier when snow buried the earth and the winds howled like restless spirits. A story of a family who faced nights colder than death and mornings where the fire was their only guardian. This is not a tale of riches, nor of great battles. It is a tale of survival, of a father, a mother, and their children clinging together in the heart of winter's endless storm. So, before we begin, remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy stories whispered from history. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Now, pull your blanket close, let the room grow quiet, and come with me into the snowbound silence of a cabin where firelight fights against the dark. A vast white wilderness stretches across the American frontier. Heavy snow buries the land in silence. Dark storm clouds swirl low over the rolling plains. The wind howls like restless spirits across the frozen earth. In the middle of the endless snow, a small log cabin stands alone. The roof is heavy with thick layers of snow, muffling the world beyond its sturdy walls. Wooden walls creak as the storm presses against them, each gust shaking the very foundation. Snowdrifts pile high, nearly reaching the windows. The door shudders under the force of the wind, but remains firmly secured. A wisp of smoke rises weakly from the chimney, almost lost in the swirling snow. On the window panes, frost patterns spread like delicate lace, each design a fleeting masterpiece. The glass rattles as fresh, icy gusts strike, announcing the arrival of new flurries. Behind the frosted glass, a faint orange glow flickers, casting dancing shadows across the rough-hewn log walls. Inside, the air is still, the only sound the crackling of the dying fire and the wind's mournful song. The light from the hearth flickers across the worn floorboards, revealing a scene of rustic comfort. In the center of the cabin sits a massive cast-iron stove, its embers glowing faintly, red but weak. The fire is nearly gone, reduced to a handful of glowing coals. Outside, the blizzard rages, but inside, the air is still, heavy with the scent of wood smoke and something undefinable. The air inside is biting cold, every breath visible as a fleeting mist. Quilts hang across the doorway, forming a barrier against the howling wind. In the corner, an old rocking chair sways slightly with each shake of the cabin. On a sturdy wooden table sits a tin cup, frozen solid with ice, a reminder of the harsh conditions that prevail outside. Old tools hang on the wall, their surfaces faintly glistening with frost, silent witnesses to the cabin's enduring strength. In the far corner, a pile of split logs awaits, ready to replenish the fire's dwindling embers. Time seems to stand still, punctuated only by the storm's relentless howl and the soft sigh of the wind as it finds its way through the cracks in the cabin walls. A single ray of light pierces the gloom, illuminating dust motes dancing in the stillness. It's a small thing, but in this moment it feels like a lifeline, a connection to the world beyond the storm. Clara, the mother, pulls her shawl tighter, seeking solace against the encroaching cold. Her face, pale in the dim glow of the fire, reflects the flickering flames, her eyes distant, lost in thought. She gazes down at the slumbering forms beneath the layered quilts, their soft breaths the only indication of life within. The youngest whimpers in sleep, clutching a scrap of wool as if seeking comfort in its roughness. The quilts rise and fall with faint breathing, each inhale and exhale a testament to the tenacious hold of life, even in the face of such unrelenting cold. Frost creeps along the wooden bed frame, weaving intricate patterns that seem to pulse with the rhythm of the storm. Daniel, the eldest boy, stirs restlessly, his breath escaping in small white clouds. He shifts deeper into his coverings, seeking refuge in their warmth. Outside, the wind screams against the walls of the cabin, a relentless assault that seems determined to tear down the barriers that have held so steadfastly against the raging blizzard. The wind moans like a wounded beast, searching for a way inside, clawing at the door, rattling the windows, trying desperately to find purchase in the rigid structure. Snow swirls through a crack in the wall, dancing in the faint light, finally settling on the floor in a blanket of white. Clara presses worn rags into the gaps, seeking to stem the flow of biting cold that seeps through the cracks. The roof beams groan under the strain of the accumulating snow, the very structure of the cabin protesting against the relentless onslaught of the storm. The cabin itself strains against the icy grip of the blizzard, its timbers creaking like an old man's bones. Elias, the father, sits upright on the bed's edge, his gaze unwavering as he watches the play of shadows and light on the stove's surface. In the depths of his eyes, a fierce determination burns brightly, refusing to be extinguished by the encroaching darkness. He knows that the fire within the stove cannot die. It must not die. It is more than just a source of warmth. It is a beacon of hope, a symbol of resilience in the face of the unforgiving wilderness. His breath hangs heavy in the frozen room, each inhalation a testament to the biting cold that seeps through the layers of clothing, wrapping its icy fingers around his lungs. The walls shake as another gust strikes, rattling the windows and sending fresh shivers through the room. Snow cascades from the roof, adding to the ever-growing drifts that threaten to engulf the cabin entirely. The chimney whistles as the wind claws at the roof, seeking a way to penetrate the last line of defense between the family and the freezing temperatures. Elias rises, pulling his threadbare coat tighter around him, his weathered hands gnarled by years of hard work. He steps across the frost-covered floorboards, his eyes never leaving the stove, his resolve hardening with each step. The cabin door rattles violently, its hinges screaming in protest, as if warning of the chaos that lies beyond. A draft of cold air hisses through the gaps in the door, bringing with it the scent of snow and the promise of more biting winds. Elias, steadying the frame with his hand, closes his eyes for a moment, picturing the slumbering forms of his family, their innocent faces trusting in his ability to keep them safe. When he opens his eyes, there is a new, found determination in their depths. Behind him, the children murmur in sleep, their breaths mingling with the dying embers in the stove. Clara, her face etched with worry, watches him, her eyes questioning, yet filled with a quiet strength that has been forged in the fires of their shared existence. The kettle by the stove is frozen solid with ice, a casualty of the relentless cold that seeps into every crevice. She sees the fire's fragility, but she also sees the unbreakable spirit that resides in her husband's eyes. As the night deepens, the storm rages with renewed fury, shaking the cabin to its core. The wind screams like a banshee, whipping snow into frenzied dances across the frozen landscape. Within the confines of the little cabin, a battle is being fought, not with swords and shields, but with a resolute spirit and an unwavering will to survive. And as the first rays of dawn begin to peek over the horizon, the outcome of this silent battle becomes clear. Life, tenacious, resilient, and full of quiet strength, refuses to be extinguished. And in this small cabin, nestled amidst a sea of snow, hope flickers like a fragile flame against the darkness. The storm still rages outside, furious and unrelenting. Inside the cabin, the tiny flame trembles in the stove. Its fragile glow pushes back the heavy shadows. Elias McAllister watches the flame, his eyes steady. Beside him, curled in a quilt, his wife Clara lies sleeping. Their breaths rise in faint clouds of mist. The youngest of their two boys stirs and whimpers softly, seeking the warmth of his brother's shoulder. Daniel, the eldest, pulls the quilt tighter around them both, murmuring soothing words. Frost still clings to the wooden walls. The storm's roar shakes the cabin beams above. Elias, however, remains focused on the stove, his weathered face illuminated by the flickering orange light. Carefully, he reaches out and adds another cedar splinter to the glowing ember. This one catches, crackling softly in the sudden silence. The warm light dances across Elias's face, highlighting the worry etched into his features. His breath fogs the air as he leans forward again. A thin flame curls upward, licking the dry wood. Elias pulls back, allowing the precious heat to spread. It creeps faintly across the cabin floor, reaching out like a lifeline against the encroaching cold. The warmth does little to chase away the frost, but it brings a measure of comfort nonetheless. From where she sleeps, Clara stirs, mumbling softly, a faint smile gracing her lips. The youngest child sighs and curls deeper under the quilt, seeking solace in his brother's embrace. Elias watches over them, shielding the flame with his hand from the cold draft that seeps in under the door. His eyes, though tired, never leave the small, growing fire. Gently, the stove glows brighter, pushing away the frost a little more each moment. Elias, sensing their precarious situation, rises. Carefully, he adds a second splinter, his movements steady and calm. The fire responds, crackling louder, filling the small room with sound that is almost music to their ears. The dancing flames cast shifting shadows across the log walls, making the familiar shapes seem alive. For a moment, Clara's face glows faintly orange as she sleeps. The storm outside continues its relentless assault, but within the cabin, a fragile sense of security grows. The firelight paints Elias's face in hues of amber, emphasizing the lines etched by years of hardship and worry. Nearby, the iron kettle begins to thaw, the frost melting into droplets along its rim. A thin wisp of steam rises slowly upward, carrying with it the promise of warmth. Elias sits back for a moment, his eyes tired, watching the flames. The storm howls like wolves beyond the walls. Snow pounds the roof with merciless weight, each thud echoing the relentless pounding of his heart. The wind screams through the chimney, threatening to snuff out their fragile flame. Yet somehow this small fire continues to grow, a defiant spark against the consuming darkness. With a sigh, Elias leans forward again, whispering, "Hold on." He places another log carefully into the stove, coaxing the flames back to life. The flames leap higher, stronger against the encroaching darkness, their reflection dancing in Elias's determined eyes. Warmth creeps outward, filling the air, chasing away some of the biting chill. Clara stirs again, her face softening in peaceful slumber. Daniel, the eldest, breathes more steadily, his young chest rising and falling rhythmically. The youngest child releases the scrap of wool he had been clutching and curls into a tighter ball, seeking refuge in the growing warmth. Peace returns to their breathing, their faces relaxed in sleep. Hope flickers in Elias's chest, fragile as the flame, but real nonetheless. He rubs his hands near the warmth of the stove, his fingers stiff and aching from the cold. But the pain is overshadowed by a new resolve. With gentle persistence, he tends to the fire, keeping it alive. And as the night deepens, he stares into the dancing flames, memories stirring within him. Harsher winters than this one have tested their family before. His jaw tightens at the memory of those times when death seemed close, when the cold threatened to extinguish their hopes. But here they are, once again, bound together by love and the promise of a new day. The fire crackles merrily now, chasing away the oppressive silence. Outside, the storm screams its fury. Snow whirls against the cabin like an ocean wave crashing against a rocky shore. Icicles rattle against the window frame, threatening to break free and pierce the wooden walls. Another gust shakes the door, causing it to shudder in its frame. Despite the relentless assault of the elements, the cabin stands firm, fragile, yet unbroken. Within its weathered walls, Elias leans back, exhausted but resolute. His gaze never strays from the fire, from the heart of the stove where the flames leap and flicker, casting long, dancing shadows on the rough, hewn logs that form their only shelter. As the hours pass, Clara murmurs a prayer in her sleep, her voice barely audible above the storm. The children shift closer together, seeking the warmth of shared body heat. The youngest snuggles into his brother's side, seeking comfort in the darkness. The old iron kettle near the stove begins to whistle faintly, a counterpoint to the raging storm. Steam curls upward, soft against the cold air. The rhythmic crackle of the fire gradually drowns out the wind's mournful howl. Elias watches the flames, finding solace in their steady dance. When he thinks they are at their most vulnerable, the fire surges higher, pushing back the shadows. Hope flickers in his chest, fragile as the flame, but real nonetheless. Quietly, he pours a little water into a tin cup, the warmth steadying his chilled hands. He takes a sip, the hot liquid soothing his throat. Outside, the storm continues its relentless assault, but within the cabin, a fragile sense of security grows. Gently, he sets the cup down and whispers again, "Still alive." His words vanish into the firelight, lost to the wind's mournful cry. The flames leap and flicker, casting dancing shadows on the log walls. Elias watches, his face illuminated by the warm glow. In the distance, a wolf cries, its lonely voice echoing the howl of the wind. The storm rages on, burying the land in snow, shaking the very foundations of their cabin. But within its sturdy walls, a small fire continues to burn, its heart strong and unwavering. Slowly, the room begins to glow with a warm light that fights against the encroaching darkness. The flames reflect in Clara's peaceful eyes as she sleeps, her face softened by the firelight. The children breathe deeply, seeking warmth and safety in their small cabin home. Hope flickers in Elias's chest, fragile as the flame, but real nonetheless. He tends to the fire, ensuring it remains strong and steady. As the night deepens, the firelight paints the cabin ceiling with dancing shadows. The wind's mournful howl fades into the background, replaced by the comforting crackle of the flames. Gently, the warmth spreads, chasing away the biting chill. The old iron kettle near the stove begins to whistle softly, a counterpoint to the raging storm. Steam curls upward, a thin white line against the dark cabin air. Time passes, measured only by the crackling fire and the sighing wind. Then, just as the first pale fingers of dawn begin to touch the horizon, the storm outside begins to ease. The wind's grip on the cabin weakens, and the relentless drumming of the snow slows to a gentle tapping. Hope flickers in Elias's eyes, fragile as the flame, but real nonetheless. He tends to the fire, ensuring it remains strong and steady. As the night deepens, the firelight paints the cabin ceiling with dancing shadows. The wind's mournful howl fades into the background, replaced by the comforting crackle of the flames. Gently, the warmth spreads, chasing away the biting chill. The old iron kettle near the stove begins to whistle softly, a counterpoint to the raging storm. Steam curls upward, a thin white line against the dark cabin air. Time passes, measured only by the crackling fire and the sighing wind. Then, just as the first pale fingers of dawn begin to touch the horizon, the storm outside begins to ease. The wind's grip on the cabin weakens, and the relentless drumming of the snow slows to a gentle tapping. Hope flickers in Elias's eyes, fragile as the flame, but real nonetheless. He tends to the fire, keeping it alive through the long night. The fire burns bright, its heart strong. Clara's face glows with quiet peace, her breathing soft and even. The children, nestled together, breathe deeply, safe for now. And as the first pale fingers of dawn begin to touch the horizon, the storm outside begins to ease. The wind's grip on the cabin weakens, and the relentless drumming of the snow slows to a gentle tapping. Hope flickers in Elias's eyes, fragile as the flame, but real nonetheless. He tends to the fire, keeping it alive through the long night. The fire burns bright, its heart strong. Clara's face glows with quiet peace, her breathing soft and even. The children, nestled together, breathe deeply, safe for now. And the dancing shadows on the cabin ceiling seem to whisper a promise of a new day. As midnight settles heavy over the frozen wilderness, the storm howls with even greater fury outside the little cabin. The wind screams and moans like some wild beast. Inside, the cabin glows faintly with a fragile firelight. Elias sits near the stove, his eyes fixed on the dancing flames. His face is grim, etched with worry lines, but resolute. Beside him, the kettle whistles faintly, its song almost drowned out by the tempest. Clara stirs, waking briefly from her uneasy sleep. Her face is weary but calm, her eyes filled with a quiet strength. For a moment, she just listens to the raging storm, its icy fingers drumming against the cabin walls. Then her gaze turns to her sleeping children. Their youngest, Samuel, shivers slightly, clutching his quilt tightly around him. His breath hitches in his sleep, his small chest rising and falling rapidly. Daniel, the elder, breathes uneasily, his face pale, his lips moving soundlessly as if calling out in a dream. Clara whispers softly, "It feels endless." Elias nods, his jaw set in grim silence. He reaches out a calloused hand, placing another log into the stove with care. Sparks leap and play around him, casting an orange glow on his furrowed brow and strong profile. Shadows stretch long and lean across the cabin floor, reaching out like grasping claws. Outside, the wind continues its relentless assault. More snow piles high against the walls, nearly burying the windows. Frost crawls along the wooden beams overhead, weaving intricate patterns of white. Clara wraps her shawl tighter around her shoulders, shivering. She watches the fire, her eyes searching its flickering depths. Elias brushes fine snow dust from his coat, stepping closer to the stove. He pours warm water into a tin cup, offering it to his wife. "Drink," he says, his voice rough with fatigue. Clara takes a sip, her hands trembling slightly. The warmth spreads through her, steadying her for a moment. She meets Elias's gaze, seeing the determination in his eyes, the fierce love and protectiveness in his touch. For a brief moment, the storm slams against the cabin door, rattling the old wood. Snow sprays through the cracks into the room, swirling in tiny eddies and dancing on the hearthrug. Elias presses rags deeper into the frame, sealing out the worst of the cold. Clara whispers a prayer, her lips moving silently. The children stir, their small faces pale and drawn in the firelight. Daniel coughs faintly, a thin, reedy sound that echoes strangely in the still air. Clara brushes his hair back gently, her touch feather-light. "We must last until morning," Elias murmurs, his eyes never leaving the fire. His words sound heavy, burdened with the weight of responsibility, yet certain. The fire crackles louder, seeming to rise in response to his silent vow. Light flickers across Clara's tired eyes, chasing away the shadows of worry. She closes her eyes briefly, drawing strength from the sight of her husband and children asleep beside her, breathing softly. Outside, the storm roars like a living beast, shaking the very foundations of the cabin. Snow collapses from the roof into the drifts, piling higher and higher. Icicles rattle violently against the window frames, their sharp tinkling mingling with the wind's mournful cry. The cabin shakes, but it stands firm, a steadfast sentinel against the raging elements. Elias grips the stove door tightly, his knuckles white against the worn wood. He reaches out, adding another piece of cedar kindling to the fire. The flames leap higher, driven by the wind's icy breath, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Warmth spreads slowly, thin but real, pushing back the encroaching cold. Light glints on Clara's tear-filled eyes. She whispers, "The children must not freeze." Elias nods, his face grim with resolve. He watches the fire, his breath fogging the air. In the silence, the sound of crackling wood fills the small space, mingling with the distant howl of the storm. Steam curls from the kettle in thin wisps, carrying the promise of warmth and comfort. The children's breathing grows steadier, their small bodies relaxed at last. Daniel clutches his brother's hand in sleep, his thumb stroking Samuel's cheek. Clara pulls the quilts tighter around them, seeking to shut out the storm's icy fingers. Elias rises, his joints stiff from the day's labor and the night's vigil. He sits again, staring into the glowing coals, his eyes reflecting the firelight. The embers burn low, sending sparks spiraling up the chimney. The wind screams outside, relentless and unending. Clara leans against the wall, watching the fire. Her eyes are half closed, her face lined with exhaustion. The rocking chair sways gently, as if coaxed by an unseen hand. The cabin groans, protesting as the wind hammers it once more. Frost sparkles like glass along the window edges, weaving a delicate tracery of ice. The flames throw long, trembling shadows on the wall, reaching out like supplicating hands. "Stay with us," Elias whispers to the fire, his voice hoarse. The fire answers with a bright crackle, sending sparks scattering like 1,000 tiny stars. A sliver of warmth spreads slowly, thin but real, pushing back the encroaching cold. Clara whispers, "It feels like forever." Elias glances at her, his eyes speaking volumes. He watches the logs shift, their orange glow mirrored in her tired eyes. The storm rages outside, merciless and unending. Snow drifts higher, pressing against the door. Yet inside, the cabin glows with a stubborn light, defying the darkness, giving hope in the endless night. Dawn has not yet come, but the storm grows stronger. The wind howls like 1,000 voices across the wilderness. Icicles hang suspended from the eaves, glistening teeth of ice against the grey sky. Snow buries the cabin walls higher and higher, piling up against the window panes. The roof groans under the crushing weight of ice, each gust driving another shard of frozen rain against the fragile boards. The relentless assault of winter's fury seems like a living thing clawing at their sanctuary. Inside, the stove glows defiantly with its orange light, casting dancing shadows on the weathered faces of those who huddle near. Elias sits alert, watching every shadow move, listening to the wind's mournful cry. Clara cradles her children close, burying her face in the thick quilts that cover them. Her youngest whimpers softly, stirred by the storm's unrelenting roar. Daniel wakes, coughing into the cold air, his thin nightgown offering little warmth against the biting chill. Clara shushes him, soothing him back to sleep with gentle words and a touch as light as a feather. Frost clings to her hair like silver threads, sparkling jewels woven into a crown of winter's might. But her eyes, they hold a different kind of fire, a fierce determination that refuses to be extinguished by the raging storm outside. She holds Daniel close, whispering stories of bravery and resilience as the wind screams its battle cry against the cabin walls. While Elias, with a grunt, rises from his seat, pushing another log into the stove. Sparks leap upward, tracing erratic paths through the smoke-filled air before vanishing into the darkness above. The flames flicker and grow, momentarily chasing away the encroaching gloom that threatens to consume them all. And for a moment, there is peace. Then the storm slams against the cabin like a hammer striking an anvil. Snow blasts through the cracks in the walls with icy force, each gust a tiny dagger piercing the fragile barrier between them and the unforgiving elements. Driven by an instinct to survive, Elias throws himself at the onslaught, stuffing rags into the gaps in the walls, trying to stem the flow of icy air that threatens to extinguish their last embers of hope. But even as he works, his wife's voice rings out, laced with a fear that mirrors the tempest outside. "The storm will break us," she whispers, her words tumbling over each other in a torrent of despair. Yet Elias, his face grim, shakes his head, his gaze unwavering. "No," he says, his voice a low growl that cuts through the din. "We will endure," he declares, his jaw set with determination. And as if in answer, the firelight dances in his determined eyes, reflecting the unwavering spirit that burns bright within. He kneels again, pushing more logs into the heart of the stove, feeding the fragile flame that flickers back to life, chasing away the encroaching darkness. Orange light spills across the room, weaving patterns on the rough-hewn beams overhead. And in the corner, the kettle begins to sing again, its whistling rising above the howling wind, a defiant melody of hope amidst the storm's relentless rage. Clara watches, a small smile touching her lips as she takes a sip of the warm water from the tin cup Elias hands to her. The steam curls upwards, carrying with it the scent of wood smoke and resilience, a tangible reminder of the battle they're waging against the elements. She feels a measure of calm return, steadying her hands as she holds the cup. Her children, nestled together, seek warmth in each other's presence, their small bodies a fortress of innocence and trust. For now the storm rages, but within the four walls of their cabin, life persists, nurtured by the glowing heart of the fire. The rocking chair creaks in the draught, swaying gently as if lulled by the rhythm of the wind's lament. And all around them the cabin shakes, a seasoned ship tossed about on a stormy sea, but holding firm against the waves of winter's wrath. Outside, the trees bend under the fury of the wind, their bare limbs twisting and turning in a desperate ballet of survival. Snow swirls around them, rising in a blinding ocean tide, threatening to engulf the world in its icy embrace. The sky above is a swirl of black and white chaos, mirroring the turmoil of the elements that rage with untamed abandon. And in the distance, the mournful cry of wolves blends with the wind's lament, carried on the storm's breath, a haunting echo of the wild things that prowl in the night. Against this backdrop of untamed fury, the cabin stands resolute, a beacon of fragile hope in a sea of unrelenting white. Icicles rattle against the windows like claws scraping against glass, a chilling percussion accompanying the storm's relentless crescendo. The wind screams louder, more furious than before, a primal roar that shakes the very foundations of their sanctuary. And as the night deepens, the storm reaches its most violent moment, testing the strength of those who dare to defy its icy wrath. Inside, the fire blazes stronger with every log that Elias feeds into the insatiable maw of the stove. He wipes sweat from his brow despite the cold, his movements sharp and efficient as he tends to the flames that have become their lifeline against the encroaching darkness. Each spark that leaps upward is a testament to their tenacity, each flicker of light a promise that they will not be consumed by the shadows. Beside him, Clara whispers prayers, her voice barely audible above the din, her hands tightly clutching the quilt that surrounds her and her children. Her eyes are closed, her lips moving in silent supplication as she seeks solace in the rituals of faith. Daniel's cough fades into the background, replaced by the crackling of the fire and the whistle of the wind. Slowly, the warmth returns, chasing away the chill that had threatened to grip him once more. The storm strikes again, a violent crash of thunder that shakes the very rafters of their cabin, rattling the windows as if eager to breach their defenses. Snow pours through the chimney opening, momentarily smothering the flames that leap and dance in the stove. With lightning reflexes, Elias leaps forward, sealing the opening with a rag, cutting off the icy intrusion that threatens to extinguish their flickering hope. For a moment, smoke swirls around the room, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and distant fires, mingling with the smell of wood smoke that has permeated their lives these past months. Clara coughs, covering her mouth with a hand as the fumes fill her lungs, her eyes watering from the sudden onslaught of foreign scents. But Elias is quick to react, adjusting the stove to restore the draft and coax the flames back to life. The fire sputters, then grows again, sending sparks spiraling upwards in a shower of tiny stars. Relief passes briefly across Elias's face, etched in the lines around his eyes, and the tightening of his lips before he turns back to the task of feeding the fire. The children stir, but remain asleep, their breaths mingling with the scent of wood smoke and woodsage. A sense of fragile determination settles over the cabin, nurtured by the warmth that clings to the corners of the room like a tenacious vine. The storm rages on, but within its untamed fury, life persists, clinging to existence as the wind screams its mournful song. Outside, the world is lost in a blanket of white, the trees bowing under the weight of the snow, the lake swallowed whole by the winter's grasp. But within the cabin's embrace, a single candle flame could pierce the darkness, guiding them through the long night until dawn breaks and the storm's fury subsides. Elias adds another log to the fire, watching as the flames catch hold, sending sparks flying into the smoke-filled air like shooting stars in a winter's night sky. Each ember is a testament to their struggle, each flicker of light a promise of survival. He glances at his wife, her form bathed in the orange glow of the firelight, her face etched with worry, but her eyes shining with an unwavering resolve. She strokes her youngest child's hair gently, murmuring words of comfort and reassurance, as if the storm itself could hear her tender song. "Sleep," she whispers, her voice barely audible above the wind's relentless roar. "We are safe." The flames roar louder inside the stove, their song rising above the wind's lament. The kettle whistles sharply, the sound echoing in the room like a triumphant fanfare, announcing their continued endurance against the odds. Elias pours hot water into a tin cup, his movements sure and steady despite the cramped space and the shadows that dance around him. He hands it to Clara, who takes it with a grateful nod, her fingers brushing his in a silent acknowledgement of their shared struggle. As she sips the warm liquid, her hands tremble slightly, betraying the toll that the relentless storm has taken on her. But with each drop that touches her lips, she steadies, finding strength in the simple act of sustenance that binds them together. Outside, the world is cloaked in a heavy silence, muffled by the thick blanket of snow that covers everything in sight. It's as if the storm has hushed all sounds, leaving only the wind to whisper its tale of fury and defeat. Within the cabin, however, life pulses with fragile warmth, sustained by the flickering light that drives back the encroaching darkness. The storm howls, furious at its failure to break their spirit, its icy breath pressing against the windows, seeking a way in. Icicles rattle once more, tapping a chilling rhythm against the glass, threatening to pierce the fragile barrier between them and the freezing cold. Then one by one they break and fall, vanishing into the swirling whiteness that hides the world from view. Snow presses higher, driven by the wind's relentless force, covering half the windows, obscuring the daylight that struggles to penetrate the thick layers of ice. The cabin creaks like an old ship, tossed about on a stormy sea, its timbers groaning under the strain of the elements that batter against its sides. But it endures, held together by the same forces that drive the storm, the unyielding strength of will that binds family and home in a bond that can weather any tempest. And at the heart of it all, Elias stands firm, gripping the stove with calloused hands, his gaze fixed on the flames that dance before him. His face is a mask of grim determination, his jaw set in a line that shows no fear, only the quiet strength of one who knows that life, like a stubborn weed, finds a way to bloom even in the harshest winters. Clara, kneeling beside her children, closes her eyes, whispering words of hope and resilience, her voice a soft counterpoint to the storm's relentless roar. "Hold us through this night," she murmurs, her lips moving in silent supplication as she seeks solace in the rhythms of faith. And in response, the fire crackles louder, its flames leaping and swirling, sending sparks spiraling upward like tiny stars against the darkening sky. Shadows dance across the beams overhead, weaving eerie patterns that seem to mock the storm's fury, reminding them that even in the darkest hours, life persists, nurtured by the flickering glow of hope that refuses to be extinguished. Outside, the storm reaches its peak, a deafening roar that shakes the very foundations of their home, a symphony of howling winds and crashing waves of winter's wrath. But within the fragile walls of their cabin, the flame of hope burns on, defying the elements and whispering promises of a new dawn. For they have endured the longest night, and with the first light of morning, the storm will break, leaving behind a world cleansed and still. The wind keens like a banshee, clawing at the cabin. Snow lashes against the glass, blurring the firelight within. Night has fallen, and the storm shows no mercy. It buries the cabin deeper, muffling the world in white silence. Inside, the fire burns low in the stove, its light weaker now. Elias kneels beside it, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. His beard and hair are frosted with ice crystals. His hands tremble slightly as he feeds the last cedar splinters into the hungry flames. Across the room, Clara sits near the children, her shawl wrapped tight against the cold. Her face is pale, lips blue with cold. She watches her son Daniel stir, coughing weakly. She presses her hand against his forehead, worry deepening in her tired eyes. The youngest child whimpers in restless sleep. She rocks him gently beneath the quilt, murmuring soft words of comfort. Her husband, Elias, leans against the wall nearby, drained of strength. His breath fogs the air, ragged and shallow. The sound of the storm fills every silence. They hear the wind scream outside, then the sudden crash of snow from the roof above. Frost creeps across the bed frame like white veins. In the rocking chair, Clara glances down at the kettle hanging over the fire. It rattles faintly, nearly empty. She pours the last drops of warm water into a tin cup and walks to her husband. "Drink," she whispers. He shakes his head slowly, pushing it back toward her. "No, you," he croaks, gesturing with a trembling hand. "You need it more." She insists, pressing the cup into his calloused hands. "Please, Elias." He looks up at her, eyes dark with fatigue. Slowly, he brings the cup to his lips and sips the warm water. Then he closes his eyes, leaning back against the wall as the liquid warms his belly. She returns to the children, their breathing faint but steady. The fire flickers weakly, casting long shadows that deepen around them. Outside, the wind rises to a frenzy. Clara runs her fingers through her tangled hair, whispering prayers under her breath. The cabin shakes with another gust. She rocks the cradle, keeping time with the storm. The fire sputters, struggling to hold its own against the onslaught of freezing winds. A log collapses in the stove, plunging them into darkness. Elias scrambles for a lantern, finding it on the floor beside the hearth. He lights the lamp and sets it down, revealing the extent of their dwindling supplies. Only a few small logs remain in the pile. Gently, he takes the smallest one, heavier than it should feel. He walks back to the stove and lays it into the empty space, feeding the flames. The fire licks upward, climbing higher, momentarily brighter. The warmth returns faintly to the cabin. Clara breathes out a shaky sigh, a moment of relief passing through her. She strokes her youngest child's hair softly, murmuring, "There, there." The babe quiets, snuggled deep in the crook of her arm. The fire sputters again, threatened by the biting winds. Elias leans back, shoulders slumped with fatigue, his eyes fix on the stove's faint glow, seeing the last embers of hope. Outside, the storm screams louder than ever, shaking the very foundations of the cabin. Snowdrifts rise against the door, sealing it shut. From the window, they watch icicles thicken along the frames. The cabin groans beneath the weight of ice pressing against it. Clara tightens her hold on the quilt, shielding the children from the worst of the cold. In the rocking chair, frost forms on the glass pane beside her. She traces the frozen pattern with a fingertip, a distracted look on her face. From the corner, Elias gathers what remains of the kindling, desperation creeping into his voice. "Come, Clara, we have to keep the fire going. We can't give up." She knows he's right, but weariness pulls at her eyelids. "Just until morning," she whispers. "Then we can rest." The fire sputters, struggling to hold on. Elias blows gently on the embers, coaxing them back to life. The flame brightens faintly, catching the dry twigs he fed it. Beside him, the kettle whistles softly, its song a mournful sound. She lays a hand on his arm, fingers cold from exposure. "Sleep now, Elias. I will watch." He looks at her, eyes dark with fatigue, but he nods slowly, sinking onto the bed beside their children. For a moment, all is quiet, save the crackling fire and the distant howl of the wind. Outside, the storm rages on, refusing to end. Through the window, the relentless flakes swirl and drift. Clara watches, fear tightening her chest. The fire sputters, sending sparks scattering across the ceiling. Suddenly, a crash from the roof above makes her start. More snow slides off, momentarily blocking their view of the fire. She scrambles to the other side of the room, peering out. The wind screams just beyond the glass, relentless and unforgiving. As the fire fades once more, Clara calls out, "Elias, wake up! Please, God, Elias, help me!" She shakes her husband, but his breathing is slow and shallow. Outside, the wind wails like a wounded animal. "Wake up, please," she begs, panic rising within her. With a jolt, Elias stirs. Clara throws more cedar shavings into the stove, hoping to coax a flame back to life. She turns to her husband, his face ashen in the dim lantern light. "Help me, Elias," she whispers urgently. "The fire, the children, I don't know what to do." His eyes flutter open, taking in the scene around them. "It's all right, Clara," he croaks, his voice hoarse. "We're going to be all right." But his words lack conviction. The wind howls again, shaking the cabin in its icy grip. Clara fights back tears, knowing they've reached the breaking point, but refusing to give in to despair. She wraps the quilt tighter around her shoulders, determined to hold on for just a little while longer. The fire sputters in the stove, clinging to existence. Outside, the storm reaches its peak, but inside, hope flickers with every spark. Hope flickers with every spark inside the stove. The family clings to warmth against the endless cold. The wind screams like a banshee outside, but the fire glows orange in the fading twilight. The cabin shakes with the fury of the storm, but the family holds on. Daniel stirs again, his breathing shallow. Clara leans close, pressing her ear to his lips. "What is it, my love? What do you say?" He whispers a broken word, his voice fragile. "Cold," he murmurs. "You are cold." She pulls the quilt tighter around him, enveloping him in its folds. "I know, my darling, I'm sorry, just hold on." Her voice trembles. "Hold on." Elias grips the stove door tightly. His eyes are fierce despite his exhaustion. "Don't worry, Clara," he says, his voice strained. "We're going to be all right. We always are." But even as he speaks, the fire sputters, threatened by the biting winds. Another log collapses in the stove, plunging them into darkness. Through the window, the snow falls relentlessly. Elias strikes a match, lighting the lantern beside him. The dancing flame reveals the extent of their dwindling supplies. Only a few small logs remain in the pile, and the youngest child stirs in his sleep, whimpering softly. Clara rises, walking to the cradle. There, little one," she murmurs, soothing the babe. Outside, the wind blasts against the windows like claws. The storm rages, refusing to end. Elias leans against the wall, his breath misting in the frigid air. He clenches his fist, his knuckles white with effort. He looks at his wife, her face illuminated by the lamplight. Her eyes are filled with exhaustion, but also with an unwavering determination. In that moment, he knows they will make it through this, as they always do. The fire sputters again, sending sparks scattering across the ceiling. Clara holds the children close, shielding them from the drafts. "Just a little longer," she whispers. "Please, God, just a little longer." As the temperature drops around them, their hope begins to dwindle. The wind screams like a banshee outside, clawing at the cabin. The fire sputters, refusing to die. The family huddled inside struggles to stay warm, their faces illuminated by the dying flames. Snowflakes fall softly through the cracks in the roof. The children breathe faintly, still alive. Their parents watch over them, their faces etched with worry and fatigue. Elias takes a shaky breath. "Don't worry, Clara," he says, his voice hoarse but resolute. "We're not giving up. Not yet." The fire flickers, casting dancing shadows on the wall. The storm rages outside, but inside, hope flickers with every breath. Outside, the storm rages at its peak. Inside, the breaking point has come, but hope has not died. A soft sigh escapes Elias's lips, his eyelids fluttering open just enough to see the faint glow of first light beyond the frosted window pane. The storm is beginning to quiet, though snow still falls heavy. The wind, too, has softened, howling less fiercely through the naked branches that claw at the roof. It moans like an animal, wounded and spent, finally tiring of its furious dance. But still it bites with icy teeth, driving the flakes ever downward and burying the cabin deeper in their chilling embrace. Icicles hang long and sharp from the eaves, glittering ice teeth bared against the leaden sky. The door stands frozen shut under a wall of snow, untouched by human hands for many hours. And inside, the fire flickers low but burns steady, a fragile heart struggling to hold back the encroaching darkness. The shadows lengthen toward it, reaching fingers clawing for the last of its light. Elias sits slumped in the rocking chair, his eyes half closed from exhaustion. His face, etched with lines of worry, is slack with fatigue. Beside him, wrapped in a patchwork quilt, Clara stirs, shifting closer to the children, pulling the covers tighter about their small bodies. She watches the fire, her eyes downcast, her hands, gnarled and worn from years of toil, tighten on the fabric. The youngest child breathes softly, warmer than before. Daniel, too, seems better. His breathing is slower, more regular. A faint flush creeps up his neck and stains his cheeks with color. He murmurs faintly, his lips moving without sound. His cough, though, has left him, and Clara finds herself smiling faintly at the blessed silence. She reaches out, touching his cheek, so pale it seems almost translucent in the firelight. Yet there is a faint warmth to it now, a blessed change from the coldness of yesterday. Relief floods her, hot and sudden, bringing tears to her eyes. She turns to Elias, finding his gaze fixed on the flames, his eyes hard with worry. He sits rigid, his shoulders slumped, his weary body refusing to yield to the solace of rest. "Go, sit by the children, love," he says, his voice hoarse from disuse. "Let me watch the fire." He knows she fears the darkness, the encroaching chill that threatens to snuff out the last of their fading hope. So he forces himself upright, willing his aching bones to obey. With a deep breath, he straightens the blanket across his knees and reaches for the last small log. He lays it on the stove, sparks flaring as it strikes the iron fretwork. The flame brightens once more, casting dancing shadows on the cabin walls, chasing the darkest corners into shy retreat. Clara exhales, her shoulders lowering in relief. She returns to the children, sinking to the floor beside them. As the firelight strengthens, the shadows shrink further, fleeing to the farthest cracks and crannies. Elias watches, his eyes still grave, but a ghost of a smile touches his lips. "The storm weakens," Clara whispers, more to herself than anyone else. The words are barely audible above the crackle of the fire. Elias nods, his eyes still fixed on the flames. The kettle steams gently on the hook beside the stove, not yet whistling. Elias rises, pouring warm water into a tin cup. The steam curls upward, carrying the scent of pine needles and wood smoke. He brings the cup to Clara, who sits cross-legged on the floor beside the sleeping children. Her face is drawn and pale, but a grateful smile lights up her features as she takes the cup from him. Their fingers brush for a fleeting moment, sending a jolt of warmth through her chilled limbs. "Thank you," she murmurs, pressing the cup to her chest. She sips slowly, savoring the warmth that spreads through her body, chasing away the lingering chill. Elias watches her, his gaze unwavering, until she meets his eyes. "Better," she whispers, holding up the empty cup. For a moment, silence fills the cabin, the only sounds the crackle of fire and the soft breathing of the sleeping children. Outside, the storm fades to a dull moan, a wounded animal finally resting after its furious rampage. The walls creak less under the wind's strain, settling back into their places, waiting for the sun to climb higher in the sky. Icicles drip faintly from the eaves, each drop a tiny hammer blow on the wooden boards below. The glistening water hangs suspended in the air, tiny prisms catching the firelight and flinging it back in 1,000 glittering shards. Elias rises, walking to the frosted window. He presses his palm against the cold glass, feeling the icy fingers of winter curl around his wrist. He traces patterns in the frost, a distraction from the gnawing worry that claws at his heart. Slowly, patiently, he waits, watching the world outside the window. And then he sees it. A faint glow bleeds across the eastern horizon, paling the dark grey canvas of the sky. Hope, fragile as a newborn bird, stirs within him, beating its wings against the bars of its icy cage. Snow still falls, yes, but the sky is less dark. The infinite black that had pressed down on them, crushing their spirits, recedes, replaced by the promise of dawning light. The weakest glimmer is better than the endless night. He draws back from the window, wiping away the ice with the sleeve of his coat. He turns, finding Clara watching him, her eyes searching his face. "Do you see it too?" he asks, his voice rough with disuse. "Yes," Clara breathes, her hand flying to her chest. "I see it too." Pale grey light bleeds across the horizon, swallowing the darkest indigo and paling the endless white. Dawn is breaking, not with brilliance, but with the softest touch. The snow-laden branches creak under the weight of new-fallen flakes, heavy and slow, melting on contact and vanishing into the thirsty earth. "Morning," Clara whispers, her voice hoarse with unshed tears. Elias nods, his eyes fixed on the distant glow. At last. They stand in silence, watching the faint light grow, filling the eastern sky, chasing away the darkest shadows. The cabin, buried in its mound of white, glows dimly in the fragile dawn. The fire within burns steadily, banishing the creeping cold and filling the room with flickering life. The shadows soften, retreating into the pale morning grey, leaving only the promise of warmth and the hope of a new day. Clara touches Elias's hand, her fingers lacing through his. No words are spoken, yet a lifetime of shared hardship and devotion passes between them in that silent moment. The children sleep deeply, their faces peaceful under the soft glow of dawn. Quilts rise and fall with every steady breath. The youngest child tightens the blanket about his small form, mumbling softly in his sleep. Daniel, too, seems better, his breathing slower, more regular beneath the mountain of quilts that envelop him. Frost still clings to the walls, though thinner now, sparkling like scattered diamonds in the firelight. Drops of melted ice fall onto the floor, gathering in tiny pools that reflect the dancing flames. The rocking chair is still, quiet in the morning calm, a lonely sentinel guarding the dreams of slumbering children. The fire crackles gently, no longer desperate, reaching, grasping in its struggle to hold back the encroaching darkness. Elias rises, kneeling beside the stove. He gathers the very last log, its end charred and smoking, and lays it on the fire. The flames leap high, sending sparks scattering toward the ceiling, chasing away the lingering chill and filling the room with growing warmth. Clara closes her eyes, whispering thanks, a prayer lost in the crackling fire and sighing timbers. The kettle whistles softly, a song of survival woven in steam and hope. Elias pours steaming water into 2 cups, the fragrant steam curling upward, carrying the scent of fresh pine and wood smoke. He hands one to Clara, their fingers brushing, sending a jolt of warmth through her chilled limbs. They drink in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, the warmth filling their bodies, chasing away the lingering cold. The sweet taste of survival lingers on Clara's tongue, mingling with the rich scent of pine and wood smoke. The children stir, blinking in the faint dawn light, their small faces creased with sleepy confusion. Daniel rubs his eyes, his voice weak and raspy. "Morning," he whispers. "Morning," Clara replies, tears brimming in her eyes. She manages a watery smile, nodding gently. "It is morning, my love," she murmurs, pressing the cup to her chest. The youngest child stretches, his small arms tight around the quilt, his face scrunched in sleepy confusion. "Morning," he whispers, his voice barely audible above the crackling fire. Elias rises, kneeling by them, brushing hair from their faces. His touch is gentle, his eyes filled with love. "We are still here," he whispers, his voice rough with emotion. We are still here. Outside, the snow continues to fall lightly, driven by a wind that is less fierce, less insistent. The storm is not gone, but gentler now, allowing the faintest sliver of dawn to bleed across the horizon. The trees stand heavy with white, their branches bending under the weight of the new fallen snow. The sky above is still dark, but not impenetrable. A pale grey light filters through, promising a new day. Within the cabin, the fire crackles merrily, chasing away the shadows and filling the room with warmth. The silence is not empty, but filled with the promise of life and the soft sound of slumbering children. Clara clasps Elias's hand tightly, her fingers lacing through his. In the faintest light of dawn, hope is reborn, fragile as a butterfly, yet tenacious as the clinging vine. And within the cabin, life endures against the endless winter. The pale dawn grows slowly behind the storm clouds. Snow continues to fall, but softer, quieter now. The wind's wild scream is fading into a low, mournful moan. But the drifts outside the cabin are high and getting higher, and the roof is caked in so much white that no sliver of sun can push through. So the cabin is shrouded in grey, shadows growing long in the gloom. But inside, the fire is still burning steadily, casting flickering flames against the rough-hewn logs of the cabin wall. A few sparks drift up the chimney and out into the cold grey sky, and a faint smell of wood smoke drifts on the wind, a small beacon of life in the vast white wilderness. By the dying embers, Elias is kneeling, eyes fixed on the dancing flames. His face is gaunt, stubble shadowing his jaw, and worry creases his brow. Beside him, the woodpile is jumbled and spent, just a few small logs left standing. Soon, there will be nothing left to feed the fire. In the rocking chair by the stove, Clara sits with the children nestled against her side. Her youngest, Samuel, is sleeping soundly, his breathing soft and even. Beside him, Daniel stirs, coughs weakly, then settles back down, eyes closed. Clara's hand rests lightly on his chest, fingers splayed over his ribs. Her touch is feather-light, but reassuring nonetheless. As she watches over her son, a hint of relief softens the lines on her tired face. Elias rises, his joints stiff from sitting too long. He glances at the woodpile in the corner. Only 2 small logs remain, barely enough to keep the fire going for another hour, maybe less. If the storm doesn't let up soon, those logs won't last long at all. But he can't go out into this weather to gather more wood. No one can. So they are trapped here in this tiny cabin, with the cold and the dark, waiting for the storm to pass. He walks to the window and peers out through the frosted glass. Nothing but swirling snow and grey clouds meet his gaze. Even if he did venture out, he wouldn't be able to see a thing. Worried lines crease his forehead. He turns away, knowing there's nothing more he can do right now. Across the room, Clara sees the worry etched on his face and rises slowly from the chair. She walks to his side, meeting his gaze with understanding in her eyes. They don't need words. They've been through too much together to have to spell it out. Elias reaches out, taking her hand in his. Her skin is cool, but her grip is strong and steady. She squeezes his hand gently, silently passing along some of her quiet strength. He needs this. Right now, hope is all they have to sustain them through this long night. He pulls her closer, resting his head against hers for a moment. Then he straightens up and goes back to gathering the remaining logs, tucking them carefully beside the stove. One log is thick and sturdy, the other thin and dry. He could probably get a small fire going with just those 2, but that would waste precious fuel. They need every bit of heat they can get. Turning back to Clara, he takes the small iron kettle hanging over the fire and pours some water into it. She watches, her gaze steady and calm. When the kettle is full, he sets it back over the fire. A plume of steam rises, bringing with it the scent of hot water. It's not much, but it will help keep their spirits up. Gently, he hands her the kettle. "Drink," he says, his voice rough with fatigue. She takes it from him, bringing the cup to her lips. As she sips, he sits down in the rocking chair, pulling one of the quilts around his shoulders. For a moment, the only sound is the crackle of the fire and the hiss of the kettle as it begins to heat. The children are sleeping, their breathing soft and regular. The storm is still raging outside, but here in the little cabin, there is a fragile peace. As the minutes crawl by, Clara hands the kettle to Daniel. He takes it from her, his hand steady despite his thin frame. She watches him take a small drink, his eyes closed in appreciation. Then he hands the kettle back to her, and she passes it to Samuel. The youngest stirs, mumbles something, then takes a small sip. With the break in the darkness, the fear that had been gripping at Clara's heart eases a little.
It isn't much, but it's enough to give her hope that they might make it through the night after all. She looks up as Elias gets to his feet. He moves stiffly, his joints protesting. He walks to the window again and wipes the frost from the glass, revealing the world outside. The horizon is just beginning to glow a faint grey, but there's no sign of the sun breaking through the clouds. It will be a long, dark day.
The snow is still coming down in thick sheets, blurring the edges of the world outside the window. All he can see are the heavy, snow-laden branches of the pine trees swaying in the wind. The rest of the world is lost in the whiteout, silent and still. He turns from the window, his shoulders slumping slightly. He can't bring himself to tell Clara what he knows they both already fear. There's no telling when the storm will end. They are trapped here in the cabin, prisoners of the winter. He kneels beside the stove, feeding another small log into the flames. The fire leaps up, briefly chasing away the shadows. For a moment, the dancing flames cast flickering shadows on the wooden walls, weaving patterns of light and dark. As the firelight plays across his face, Clara sees the strain etched into his features, the worry in his eyes, the set of his jaw. She rises, leaving the children sleeping in the rocking chair, and goes to him. "You haven't eaten," she states, more than asks. He shakes his head, too preoccupied with the fire to notice she's there. "It's not time," he says, his voice hoarse. Clara lays her hand on his arm, grounding him in the present. She doesn't want him to turn into a wild animal pacing in its cage, desperate and frantic. She wants him to stay human, to hold on to his hope, however faintly. "We must wait for the light," she whispers. "But we can still rest a little now. Let go for a moment, Elias. Let go and eat." Her words are soft, but they cut through the fog of worry clouding his mind. Slowly, he meets her gaze, his eyes filled with gratitude. He leans against her shoulder, closing his eyes for a moment, letting her presence anchor him. When he opens his eyes again, he nods, his voice raspy. "Yes, you're right. We should eat." Together they sit by the fire, eating in silence. After a while, Samuel stirs, blinking awake in the dim firelight. He looks around, confused. "What's wrong?" he asks, his voice small. Clara lays her hand on his, soothingly. "Nothing, little one. Just rest." She hopes her voice doesn't betray the worry that's twisting in her gut. Daniel stirs beside her, coughing weakly. "Is the storm gone?" he asks, his voice hoarse. She looks at Elias, seeking help, but he only shakes his head, his eyes filled with regret. Turning back to Daniel, she whispers, "Not yet, but it will be soon." She prays that her faith in the future will somehow pass to her children, that they will believe in the promise of a new day, a brighter tomorrow. Outside, the wind is still howling, but the worst seems to have passed. Now the storm is just a wounded animal, slowly tiring out. The first hints of grey light are pushing back the darkness, but the full light of day is still hours away. And here in the little cabin, the family waits, hearts steady, listening for the sounds of the retreating storm, hoping for the return of the light. Morning light spreads faintly, muted behind thick clouds. Snow falls in thin veils across the wilderness. The world outside lies silent, buried and still. The cabin is half hidden beneath massive drifts. Icicles hang unmoving, frozen in the dawn. Inside, the fire burns low, but steady. Shadows flicker weakly against the wooden walls. Elias sits quietly, staring into the embers. His face is gaunt, carved with exhaustion. Clara sits with the children wrapped in quilts. The youngest whimpers softly in hunger. Clara hushes him gently, stroking his hair. Daniel lies still, eyes closed, breathing faint. Elias glances toward the cupboard. The shelves are nearly bare, dust and shadows inside. A single crust of bread sits wrapped in cloth. Clara unwraps it, her hands trembling. She divides the bread into tiny pieces. Each child receives a bite, no more. Clara eats none herself, saving the rest. Elias watches silently, his eyes filled with guilt. He clenches his hands, rough and tired. The fire crackles faintly, breaking the silence. The kettle sits empty, steam long gone. Clara places snow inside to melt slowly. She sighs, resting her head against the wall. The rocking chair is still in the corner. Elias whispers, "We must endure." His voice is low, firm despite weariness. Clara nods, eyes closed against her fatigue. The children drift into uneasy sleep again. Frost glitters along the window frames. Elias wipes away a patch of frost with his sleeve. Outside, the world is white and endless. Trees bend low, heavy with snow. No birds stir, no sound of life remains. Only silence presses against the glass. Elias sighs, turning back to the stove. He adds a scrap of wood, the last of the kindling. The flame leaps weakly, then steadies. Shadows shift faintly across Clara's face. She opens her eyes, whispering, "How much longer?" Elias shakes his head, offering no answer. He places a hand on her shoulder gently. The silence thickens, heavy in the small cabin. The children stir restlessly, murmuring in sleep. Clara pulls the quilts tighter, holding them close. The rocking chair creaks faintly in the draft. Frost creeps further along the bed frame. Elias rubs his hands together near the flame. His breath fogs in the cold air. Clara whispers, "The quiet frightens me." Elias nods, staring into the fire. The storm is gone, but silence has replaced it. Time moves slowly, dragging like heavy chains. Elias listens for sounds beyond the walls. None come. No wind, no footsteps, only stillness. Clara closes her eyes, whispering a prayer. The fire crackles softly, answering with faint warmth. The children breathe steadily, fragile but alive. Outside, the snowfield shines pale in the grey sky. The horizon is empty, lifeless and vast. The cabin stands like a lonely island in the white sea. Inside, silence weighs on every heart. Elias holds Clara's hand, firm and steady. She leans against him, eyes half shut. The flame flickers, small but defiant. Shadows sway gently across the cabin walls. In the strain of silence, hope flickers faint but unbroken. The family endures, waiting for what comes next. Morning mist hangs heavy, shrouding the wilderness in soft grey light. Snow glistens undisturbed, a blanket over the frozen ground. The cabin stands stoic, its windows like vacant eyes, staring sightlessly ahead. A lone crow calls in the distance, its harsh cry echoing in the stillness. Inside, a small fire sputters, casting flickering shadows on weathered faces. Elias sits with eyes that hold a universe of weariness. His hands, gnarled and strong, rest on a piece of wood. Across from him, Clara cradles their youngest, whose soft breaths rise and fall with gentle regularity. Their daughter, Anna, stirs nearby, her cheeks flushed with fever. The eldest, Daniel, remains still, his gaze distant, lost in some inner landscape. Hunger tugs at their bellies, a constant, gnawing ache. But the larder is bare. Days bleed into one another, measured only by the dwindling supply of firewood and the relentless march of snowdrifts against the cabin walls. Elias gathers fallen branches, his steps slow and careful. Each step is a battle against fatigue, each breath a victory over despair. With practiced hands, he feeds the fire, coaxing it back to life. Clara tends to her children, her touch gentle, her eyes filled with a fierce, unwavering love. Night falls, wrapping the world in an inky blanket of darkness. The wind whispers tales of desolation through the cracks in the cabin walls. Elias and Clara huddle close, seeking solace in each other's presence. Their children slumber, their faces pale in the firelight, their dreams a refuge from the harsh realities of their world. Hope, a fragile ember, flickers within their hearts. They cling to the promise of dawn when the sun will rise again, bringing with it the possibility of a new day. Morning mist hangs heavy, shrouding the wilderness in soft grey light. Snow glistens undisturbed, a blanket over the frozen ground. The cabin stands stoic, its windows like vacant eyes staring sightlessly ahead. A lone crow calls in the distance, its harsh cry echoing in the stillness. Inside, a small fire sputters, casting flickering shadows on weathered faces. Elias sits with eyes that hold a universe of weariness. His hands, gnarled and strong, rest on a piece of wood. Across from him, Clara cradles their youngest, whose soft breaths rise and fall with gentle regularity. Their daughter, Anna, stirs nearby, her cheeks flushed with fever. The eldest, Daniel, remains still, his gaze distant, lost in some inner landscape. Hunger tugs at their bellies, a constant, gnawing ache. But the larder is bare. The days stretch on, an endless expanse of white, broken only by the rhythmic crunch of snow underfoot and the sighing of the wind through the skeletal trees. The relentless solitude threatens to consume them. But Elias and Clara stand firm, their love for each other and their children a beacon in the gathering darkness. Their bond, forged in the fires of adversity, grows stronger with each passing hour. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of blood orange and bruised purple, they gather close, sharing stories of a life before the snow, a time when laughter echoed in these very rooms, and the scent of wood smoke mingled with the aroma of freshly baked bread. The memory of that life sustains them, fueling their determination to survive this ordeal. And as the stars begin their silent vigil in the inky canvas above, they know they are not alone. They have each other, and that in itself is a victory worth fighting for. Morning light pierces the gloom, casting long shadows across the snow-laden landscape. The silence is profound, a heavy blanket muffling the sounds of the world. Within the cabin, Elias stirs, his eyes revealing the toll of sleepless nights and unending worry. Clara, ever vigilant, watches over their children, her touch tender, her gaze unwavering. Anna stirs, her fevered breaths echoing the turmoil within her. Daniel remains still, his fate hanging in the balance. The scant stores of food offer little sustenance, stretching their meager supplies. Elias ventures out, battling the elements, searching for sustenance. The biting wind and knee-deep snow test his resolve. Each step is a Herculean effort. Driven by primal need and fatherly love, he persists, hoping against hope for a successful return. Meanwhile, within the cabin, Clara tends to her sick child, her voice a soothing balm amidst the gathering shadows. The relentless isolation presses in, threatening to extinguish their spirits. Yet she fights back, summoning reserves of strength born of desperation and devotion. As twilight descends, Elias arrives back, his face haggard, his shoulders bowed under the weight of his burden. In his calloused hands, a small rabbit, a meager prize from the unforgiving wilderness. Together, they tend to their dying fire, sharing the scant rations, their movements economical, their gazes mirroring their exhaustion. The silence is broken only by the crackle of the flames and the murmur of prayers. And as the night deepens, they huddle together for warmth, their bodies pressing against each other, seeking solace in their shared humanity. They endure, bound by the unbreakable ties of family, their spirits unbroken, their determination to survive burning bright against the encroaching darkness. A pale light begins to spread across the horizon, tentative fingers reaching across the endless dark. Slowly, oh so slowly, the thick clouds drift apart. A vast silence blankets the wilderness as the first pale fingers of dawn pierce through the heavy grey. And then something stirs within the gloom. Up above, the clouds part just enough to reveal a sliver of the morning sky. And there, nestled amidst the swirling grey, the snow glows faintly, catching the first hints of the coming sun. It shimmers and glistens, a sea of silver under a watchful eye. Below, icicles awaken, trembling as they catch the first touch of dawn. Each one sparkles like a tiny, fragile star, clinging to the eaves of the cabin as if unwilling to let go of the night. But even as they hold on, the light climbs higher. Oh, how it climbs higher! The wilderness lies vast, white and still, a world turned to crystal under the watchful gaze of the mountains. In the distance, a lone bird calls, its voice echoing strangely in the stillness. But here, inside the haven of logs and stone, the fire burns low, but steady. Elias leans against the wall, his eyes half closed, weariness etched deep on his face. Across from him, bundled in a thick quilt, sits Clara. Her hand rests lightly on his arm, her eyes never leaving his. The firelight dances in her gaze, reflecting the flickering flames in her eyes. Beside them, two small figures stir beneath their quilts, their breaths mingling with the smoke curling from the hearth. The youngest, his cheeks flushed, murmurs softly in his sleep, tracing dreams on the surface of the quilt. Suddenly, Daniel stirs beside her, blinking awake. His eyes heavy but alive, he gazes at the dancing shadows on the wooden walls. Clara strokes his hair, her touch feather light, her voice barely a whisper. "The storm is ending," she says, more to herself than to him. "The storm is over, little one." But even as she speaks, Elias stirs, pushing himself upright. Weary, but a spark of alertness in his eyes. He crosses to the frosted window, his silhouette stark against the weak light that filters through the ice-jammed panes. There, beyond the swirling grey, the first hints of morning glow. Slowly, Elias brings his hand to the glass, wiping away the ice that obscures the view. As he does, the room is bathed in an ethereal glow. Beyond the window, the sky glows pale with the promise of a dawning day. And for a moment, There is only the sound of his breath and the gentle creak of the old cabin. Then, barely audible, he whispers, "Light," he whispers, his voice hoarse with fatigue. "At last, light!" And as if drawn by his words, Clara joins him, her face pale but hopeful. Together they peer through the frost-covered window, seeking the first light of dawn. From their side, the children crawl closer, drawn by the adults' hushed voices and the promise of something stirring in the grey expanse outside. With wide, innocent eyes, they press their small hands to the cold glass, their breaths fogging the surface like a shroud. And there, framed by the ice-jammed window, the world beyond shimmers with the first hints of morning. Outside, snowflakes fall lightly, no longer fierce, no longer driven by a raging wind, but falling softly from a sky that has stilled. The wind has quieted to a gentle sigh, whispering tales of the departing storm through the bare branches of the trees. Heavy with snow, they stand like silent guardians around the cabin, sheltering it from the last vestiges of the blizzard. Within the cabin, Elias exhales, a long, shuddering breath escaping his lips. Relief floods his face, etching lines of exhaustion and gratitude onto his features. Clara leans against him, her shawl wrapped tight, seeking comfort and solace in his presence. Daniel, stirring beside her, whispers, "Is it morning?" His voice small but hopeful, and in response, Elias nods slowly, a faint smile touching his lips. "Yes," he answers, his voice rough with disuse. "Morning." And with that affirmation, the weight of the night seems to lift ever so slightly, like the lifting of a dark cloud, revealing a sliver of the blue sky above. The fire crackles softly, no longer roaring but steady and warm, casting dancing shadows on the wooden walls. Outside, the first rays of sunlight pierce through the retreating clouds, illuminating the snow-laden branches. A delicate, intricate tracery of light and shadow plays across the frozen landscape, a silent testament to the passing storm. Clara moves away from the window, her gaze returning to the fire. She dips a small tin cup into the remaining water from the kettle, her hands working with a practiced grace to prepare for the coming day. Elias watches her, his eyes filled with a deep affection and admiration. In the depths of their despair, it was she who held on to hope, who kept the fire of their spirits burning when all seemed lost. As Clara busies herself with the small tasks of the morning, Elias crosses to the hearth. With a resolute nod, he picks up the weathered axe, readying it for the day's work. The blade gleams dully in the firelight, a symbol of their resilience, their will to survive. With careful precision, he adds the very last piece of wood to the fire, coaxing the flames back to life. For a moment, the flames leap higher, glowing golden against the encroaching darkness. Beyond the window, the sky is a canvas of soft greys, the clouds beginning their slow retreat before the advancing light. And as the fire catches, warming the room with its flickering glow, Clara turns from the table, her eyes closed, her lips moving in silent thanks. The children stir in their quilts, their faces pale but hopeful. One by one, they stretch, their movements languid, their limbs stiff from hours spent curled in the safety of their makeshift beds. The rocking chair is still, quiet in the gathering light, the remnants of the storm whispering tales of survival through the creaking of the old cabin. The fire crackles merrily now, chasing away the lingering chill of the night. The room is filled with the scent of wood smoke and something akin to hope. From the corner, Clara watches them, a bitter-sweet smile gracing her lips. The youngest, his eyes shining with childlike wonder, reaches out to touch the flames. And for a moment, he is lost in the dance of the fire, oblivious to the trials that have brought them to this point. Outside, the storm has truly passed. The wind sighs softly through the trees, carrying with it the sweet scent of pine and the promise of a new day. The relentless grey of the blizzard has lifted, revealing a sky streaked with the faintest hint of blue. And as the minutes pass, the clouds retreat, exposing a sliver of the sun trapped behind the heavy drapes of winter clouds. With a gentle nudge, Elias rouses Daniel, guiding him toward the hearth. The boy shivers, pulling his shawl tighter around him, but his eyes are bright with a newfound determination. Hand in hand, Elias and Daniel gather more wood, their movements synchronized, their steps sure. The fire roars in response, its flames leaping higher, mirroring the rekindled hope in their heart. On the table, the kettle whistles softly, a cheerful sound in the vastness of the cabin. The steam curls upward, delicate in the crisp air, carrying with it the promise of warmth. Beyond the frosted window, a single bird ventures out from its hiding place, its song echoing faintly in the stillness. And as it sings, another joins in, and then another, until a chorus of birds fills the air, celebrating the return of the light. The snowfield shines like silver glass, sparkling in the rising light. The trees stand tall, heavy with snow, their branches laden with the remnants of the blizzard. The wind whispers through the pines, a mournful lullaby that speaks of battles fought and won. In the corner, Clara pours steaming water into the tin cup, her hands steady. She passes it to Daniel, her eyes filled with a mixture of love and concern. "Drink," she says, her voice soft but firm. The boy takes the cup, his small hands wrapping around the warmth, and as he sips, his shoulders slump slightly, the tension easing from his frame. One by one, they share the precious liquid, each taking their turn until the cup is empty. The youngest, snuggled close to Elias, gazes up at his father with innocent wonder, his eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. For a moment, there is only the crackling of the fire and the gentle murmur of voices as they share stories of survival and strength. The cabin stands firm, a beacon of hope in the vast wilderness, sheltering them from the fury of the blizzard and the loneliness of their despair. Through the frosted window, the first rays of sunlight touched the snow-laden branches, painting fleeting patterns of light and shadow on the cabin walls. The wind, no longer a raging beast, whispers tales of resilience and rebirth through the creaking timbers of the old structure. And as the day begins to dawn, a profound silence settles over the cabin, a silence not of despair, but of fragile hope, of lives hanging in the balance and spirits refusing to be broken. The storm has passed, leaving behind the promise of a new day. The fire crackles steadily in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls. Outside, the snow shines, glistening under the pale sky, and within the cabin, life flickers on, sustained by the tenacity of the human spirit and the enduring power of hope. The pale blue sky brightens slowly above the wilderness, a gentle awakening after the long night. Clouds scatter, breaking apart in the cold morning air, their edges softening as they drift across the vast expanse. A single beam of sunlight pierces through the grey, a golden lance cutting through the gloom. It falls across the frozen snowfield, glowing gold, transforming the barren landscape into a sea of shimmering light. The endless white glitters like diamonds, each snowflake catching and reflecting the sun's rays. Trees shimmer under the weight of snow, their branches bowing gracefully, adorned with crystalline ornaments. The world feels alive again, kissed by light, as if emerging from a deep slumber. The cabin roof sparkles with melting frost, droplets of water catching the light as they fall. Smoke rises from the chimney, curling into the sky, a sign of life amidst the frozen wilderness. Inside, the family stirs at the change in light, their senses awakening to the subtle shift in the air. Elias notices the sunbeam through the frosted glass, his eyes widening at the unfamiliar brightness. He wipes the window with the sleeve of his coat, revealing the transformed world outside. Golden light spills into the cabin, flooding the small space with warmth and hope. Clara gasps softly, her eyes filling with tears as she beholds the sight she feared she might never see again. Daniel sits up weakly, staring at the glow, his pale face illuminated by the sun's gentle touch. The youngest child claps his hands in delight, too young to fully understand the significance of the moment, but feeling the joy that permeates the air. Elias lifts him into his arms, turning toward the light, allowing the child to bask in its warmth. The sunbeam touches their faces, warm and gentle, a caress that speaks of life and renewal. Clara pulls Daniel close, her smile breaking through the weariness that has etched itself into her features. Shadows inside the cabin melt into soft golden hues, chased away by the light that streams through the window. The fire glows brighter, as if fed by sunlight, its flames dancing in harmony with the golden rays. The kettle whistles cheerfully, steam curling upward, a familiar sound that now seems filled with promise. Clara pours hot water into tin cups, her movements careful, yet filled with a new energy. She hands them carefully to the children, watching as their faces brighten as they sip the warm liquid. Elias takes a sip last, his hands steady at last, no longer shaking from cold and fear. Clara rests against him, eyes shining with relief, the weight of their ordeal lifting with each passing moment. Daniel whispers, "The sun came back," his voice filled with wonder and disbelief. Elias nods, smiling faintly, the lines around his eyes softening. "It always does," he answers, his words carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom. Outside, the snow sparkles under the golden rays, a blanket of diamonds stretching as far as the eye can see. Icicles drip faster, water glistening in the light, their crystalline forms slowly surrendering to the sun's warmth. Birds flutter from the trees, wings scattering snow, their cries echoing softly in the clear sky. Life returns to the frozen world, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. Elias steps to the doorway, testing the latch, his movements cautious, yet filled with purpose. It is frozen shut, but sunlight warms the frame, promising release. He pushes slowly, wood creaking against the ice, the sound of freedom. The door opens slightly, letting in the golden light, a flood of warmth and hope pouring into the cabin. Snow spills inside, white against the wooden floor, a bridge between their shelter and the world beyond. The children gasp at the brightness, their eyes wide with wonder and a touch of fear. Clara pulls the quilts aside, standing with them, her arms protective, yet encouraging. They gather near the open doorway, a family united by survival and hope. Sunlight streams into the cabin, golden and pure, banishing the last shadows of their long ordeal. Elias shields his eyes, then smiles wide, the joy of the moment overwhelming him. Clara clasps his hand tightly, her grip speaking volumes of love and shared struggle. The children step forward, faces glowing with wonder, drawn to the light like flowers turning toward the sun. The youngest laughs, reaching toward the light, his innocence a balm to their weary souls. Daniel leans against his mother, smiling faintly, his strength returning with each breath of fresh air. Clara whispers, "We survived," her voice thick with emotion and gratitude. Elias nods, unable to speak, the lump in his throat a testament to all they've endured. Shadows vanish, replaced by warmth and glow, as if the sun itself has taken residence within their humble home. The fire crackles in harmony with the sunlight, no longer their sole source of warmth and comfort. Steam rises from the kettle, curling into the golden air, a dance of light and vapor. The rocking chair glimmers softly in the light, its worn wood transformed into something beautiful and precious. Frost melts, dripping from the beams above, each drop a tiny prism, scattering rainbows across the floor. The cabin, once a fortress against the cruel winter, now opens itself to the promise of spring. Elias steps forward into the doorway, holding his son, his stance that of a man who has faced the worst and emerged victorious. Clara and Daniel follow, wrapped in shawls, their steps hesitant but growing stronger. Together they gaze at the shining horizon, a family united by love and resilience. The first full sunbeam falls across their faces, warming skin that had forgotten the touch of daylight. Outside, the wilderness is transformed, no longer a threat, but a canvas of beauty and possibility. The storm has passed, leaving beauty behind, a reminder that even the darkest nights give way to dawn. Snowfields stretch wide, dazzling in the light, a sea of white and gold that speaks of purity and new beginnings. The sky glows pale blue, streaked with gold, a celestial painting that celebrates their survival. Birds circle above, free and alive, their songs a joyous chorus, welcoming the new day. Trees sway gently in the morning breeze, shedding their snowy burdens, reaching toward the warmth. The cabin stands strong, scarred but unbroken, a testament to human endurance and the strength of family bonds. Inside, laughter and relief fill the air, mingling with the scent of pine and wood smoke. Hope shines brighter than the fire itself, kindled in their hearts and reflected in their eyes. The first sunbeam marks the end of endless night, a promise kept by the universe itself. As they stand in the doorway, bathed in golden light, the family feels the weight of their ordeal lifting. The wilderness that once threatened to consume them now lies peaceful and beautiful before their eyes. Elias squeezes Clara's hand, feeling the strength that flows between them. Daniel takes a deep breath, filling his lungs with crisp, sun-warmed air. The youngest child babbles happily, reaching out to catch a falling snowflake. In this moment, surrounded by the beauty of a world reborn, they know that they can face whatever challenges lie ahead. The sun has returned, bringing with it the promise of warmth, growth, and new beginnings. As they step out onto the snow-covered ground, their footprints marking the start of a new journey, they carry with them the lessons of the long night, resilience, love, and the unbreakable bonds of family. The first sunbeam has broken through, not just in the sky, but in their hearts. It illuminates a path forward, out of darkness, and into a future bright with possibility. As they walk together into this new day, their shadows stretching long behind them, they are no longer survivors, but thrivers, ready to embrace all that life has to offer with open arms and grateful heart. The cabin door creaks open wider. Sunlight spills inside. Snow piles against the threshold, glittering in golden light. Inside the cabin, Elias braces himself and pushes the door fully open. A wave of cold air rushes in, sharp but clean. The children gasp, clutching their quilts tighter. Little ones, come see. It's the first light of day since the storm began. Clara shields her eyes from the sudden brightness. The snow outside dazzles, sparkling and silent. Slowly, she steps forward, hand outstretched. She lets the cool snow touch her fingertips. At that moment, Elias steps out into the dazzling light. His boots crunch into the deep snow. He lifts the youngest child in his arms, a smile touching his lips. Clara follows, holding Daniel close against her. Together they step into the dazzling white world. Sunlight bathes their faces, warm despite the cold. They stand there for a moment, blinking at the glorious sight. The wilderness stretches endless before them, shining under the vast sky. Gently, Elias walks forward, crunching through the snow. Trees shimmer around them, their branches heavy with ice. The snowfield glitters like countless jewels. Birds flutter above them, calling into the clear air. And Elias looks upward, tears in his eyes. He feels the warmth of the sun on his weathered face. Beside him, Clara stands tall, her shawl pulled close. Daniel squints at the horizon, whispering, "It's so bright." The youngest child in Elias's arms laughs, clapping his small hands. Their footprints mark the only tracks in the untouched snow. Looking down at the boy in his arms, Elias lowers him gently onto the snow. The child stumbles for a moment, then steadies himself, leaving tiny prints in the snow. He turns to his sister, reaching out his hand. Clara kneels beside Daniel, her hand firm in his. The sunlight touches their faces with golden warmth. For the first time in what feels like forever, smiles spread across their lips. Genuinely happy, Elias lifts his face to the sky. He whispers, "We endured." Whispering back, Clara replies, "We survived." In the sudden quiet, the children's laughter rings softly. The sound of joy replaces the storm's roar. And with a gentle squeeze of her hand, Elias leads Clara forward. Together they walk into the endless expanse of white. Elias glances back at the cabin, taking it all in. Snowdrifts rise high, but paths are visible between them. Smoke curls steadily from the chimney behind them. He knows the cabin is scarred but unbroken. Clara looks back at their shelter with gratitude. "It kept us alive," she whispers. Nods, Elias' hand resting on the cabin doorframe. He turns back toward the horizon. Light shimmers across the snow like hope itself. Little ones, come see. It's the first light of day since the storm began. Daniel, pointing to the sky, marvels at the endless blue. The youngest child bends, scooping snow in his mitten. He throws it upward, laughing in delight. And more snow sparkles as it falls around them. Gently, Clara gathers both boys into her arms. She feels their small bodies against hers, safe and warm. With a final glance at the cabin, Elias steps forward. Leading them further into the open, he walks tall and strong. Their shadows stretch long across the snow behind them. And above, birds fly overhead, wings flashing against the sun. The silence is peaceful, filled with the return of life. As they walk, Clara presses her cheek against Daniel's hair. She feels Elias's hand tighten around hers. Squeezing back, he gives her a reassuring look. Hand in hand, the family walks slowly, leaving tracks behind. Each step feels like victory after endless night. Taking a deep breath, Elias fills his chest with the fresh air. Clara closes her eyes, savoring the warmth of the light on her face. The children chatter softly, their voices alive again. The snow crunches under their boots with each step. Ahead, Elias points toward the distant trees. He whispers, "The forest waits." Nods Clara, her eyes bright with new strength. The horizon glows golden, promising a future. Pausing together on a small rise of snow, they take it all in. The world spreads vast and endless around them. No storm remains, only shining silence. The cabin behind them glows faintly in the light. Wrapping his arm around Clara's shoulders, Elias feels a surge of love. The children cling close, safe in their warmth. The sun rises higher, painting the sky with fire. Hope shines brighter than fear at last. Taking a step forward, Elias makes it official. Their first steps outside become steps toward tomorrow. Standing strong, the family greets the first sunbeam of peace. And so their journey continues. And so the storm passed and the sun climbed slowly higher in the pale sky. Golden light spread across the snowfield, covering all in a blanket of glistening white. The wilderness glittered with a dazzling brightness. And over all was a hush, a deep silence left in the wake of the tempest. In the midst of the shining land stood the cabin, strong and steadfast. Its roof was deeply crowned with snow, marking it as a place of peace amidst the wild expanse. From its chimney rose a gentle plume of smoke, steady and calm against the vast canvas of the sky. From the eaves, icicles dripped steadily, their drops sparkling like diamonds in the weak sunlight. A soft breeze stirred through the frozen trees, setting their bare branches swaying like dancers in a solemn ballet. The wind sighed through the stillness, whispering tales of the world beyond the frosted window pane. As the sun climbed higher, the snow began to gleam, reflecting the pale light in a myriad of tiny sparks. Elias stood watching from the cabin door, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. Beside him, Clara stood wrapped in her shawl, her eyes reflecting the boundless expanse of the wintry landscape. The branches creaked overhead, heavy with melting snow. The air grew soft and yielding, and from the depths of the forest came the faint song of birds, their voices delicate but clear, echoing through the hushed expanse. With a deep breath, Elias stepped out into the snow, crunching softly as he walked a few steps further into the white expanse. Clara followed, her shawl wrapped close against her, her eyes fixed on his strong back. Little Daniel clung to her hand, his gaze lost in the shimmering horizon. The youngest child skipped ahead, stumbling and falling in the soft, fresh drifts, her laughter ringing out clear and sweet in the stillness. Their footprints trailed behind them, a winding path leading from the cabin into the heart of the sparkling wilderness. Elias paused, gazing across the shining land that stretched to meet the golden horizon. In his eyes, the boundless expanse was mirrored, reflecting the strength and resilience that lay within him. He turned, meeting Clara's gaze, and in her eyes he saw a universe of gratitude, a testament to the unbreakable bond they shared. Together they stood, a family united, their love a beacon in the face of life's challenges. The children huddled between them, warm and safe, their laughter echoing in the vast emptiness. The sun glowed brighter, chasing away the lingering shadows and warming their upturned faces. The air carried a hint of thaw, faint but real, whispering promises of spring's return. Closing her eyes, Clara whispered, "The world breathes again." Elias nodded, his jaw softening at last, a smile gracing his lips. Hope, like a fragile flower, stirred within his chest, reaching for the light. He bent, scooping snow in his rough hand. It melted slowly in his palm, trickling down his fingers under the sun's gentle gaze. A solitary tear escaped Clara's eye, tracing a path down her weathered cheek. Daniel whispered, awestruck, "It's beautiful." As Elias watched, mesmerized by the slow dance of melting ice, a single snowflake fell upon his calloused hand, melting instantly into his skin. It was a small miracle, a symbol of the transformation taking place both in the world around them and within their hearts. Wrapping her cloak tighter, Clara pressed him closer, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She felt the weight of their journey, the struggles they had endured, but also the strength that had carried them through. The youngest child threw snow high in the air, catching it with delight in her cupped hands. Her laughter echoed, pure and untamed, a melody that resonated with the joy of simply being alive. Birds flew low across the trees, their wings flashing against the bright expanse. They sang their songs of freedom, soaring above the world, forever dancing in the boundless expanse of the sky. All around, the forest whispered with life once more. Icicles fell with soft chimes, breaking into tiny beads of water that glistened in the weak sunlight. From the melting snow, tiny streams formed, trickling down the hillsides, their music a harmonious blend of flowing water and sparkling ice. Drooping to her knees, Clara touched the wet ground beneath her fingers, feeling the pulse of life thrumming beneath the frozen surface. She saw the first shy shoots of green pushing through the brown earth, reaching for the warming sun. With a whisper, she murmured, "Spring will come." Elias stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. He knew the long winter had tested their spirits, but with unwavering resolve, they had endured. Their eyes met, sharing a silent strength, bound by the unbreakable threads of love and resilience. Raising her head, Clara saw the sun shining brightly through the bare branches, painting patterns of light and shadow on the ground. Hope rekindled in her heart, guiding her steps as she walked beside her husband. Hand in hand, they moved forward, their footprints etching new paths in the pristine snow. The children skipped ahead, their laughter echoing through the silent trees. Gently, Elias lifted the youngest onto his shoulders, feeling the weight of their love and the warmth of their combined strength. Leaning against him, Clara clutched her shawl close, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Daniel walked beside them, his steps lighter now, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. Together, they faced the horizon, the vast canvas of the sky stretching endlessly above them. The clouds were few, brushed aside by the wind, revealing a breathtaking expanse of blue. Golden sunlight streamed down, touching every glistening flake and warming every upturned face. The snow sparkled, reflecting the promise of spring, whispering on the breeze. Life had returned to the little cabin, its walls echoing with the quiet rustle of family and the murmur of love. Outside, the wind had ceased its mournful song and the world was still, bathed in the golden glow of a new day. Through the window, the rocking chair sat still, waiting patiently by the hearth. Within, the stove hummed with gentle fire, casting dancing shadows on the wall. The quilts lay scattered, warmed by the sun's embrace, inviting weary souls to rest. On the wall, the tools hung, their frost melting away, revealing gleaming surfaces ready for use. The kettle steamed faintly, its scent of warmth lingering in the air. Soft shadows stretched gently across the wooden floor, intertwining in a delicate dance. Within those four walls, life had returned, chasing away the chill of fear and uncertainty. Peace filled its rooms, a sanctuary of love and resilience, where hope blossomed anew each morning. Outside, as the sun climbed higher, the family stood hand in hand, their faces glowing with relief and joy. The storm was only a memory, faded into the vastness of the winter sky. And in the promise of spring, hope bloomed eternal. "We are alive," Elias whispered, his voice husky with emotion. "We are blessed," Clara answered softly, her eyes shining with gratitude. Daniel smiled faintly, holding his mother's hand tightly, finding strength in her unwavering gaze. And the youngest, with a joyous laugh, pointed toward the forest, her spirit as bright and limitless as the endless expanse above. Birds flew in the distance, singing their songs of freedom, their voices blending in a harmonious chorus. Beneath the snow, a river glinted, beginning to move, carrying away the remnants of winter's icy grip. All around, the wilderness was alive again, whispering tales of renewal and rebirth. And standing there, bathed in the golden light, the family stood strong, their love a beacon in the vast wilderness. Through the trials and tribulations, they had emerged even stronger, their bonds unbreakable, their spirits unbroken. As the sun shone down on the sparkling snow, they knew that though the storm had passed, their love and resilience would endure, guiding them through life's journey together. Now, outside, the wind had finally begun to die down. The rain, it slowed to a mere trickle, then stopped altogether. In the distance, the thunder rumbled one last time before fading away, leaving behind a world washed clean and still. The clouds, they parted just enough to reveal a sliver of moon, which peeked shyly through the branches. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, watching, waiting. And then, as if awakened by some unseen hand, the fireflies began their silent symphony, each tiny spark a note in the song of the returning night. Inside the cabin, the family stirred from their uneasy slumber. Little Emma, her face streaked with dirt and tears, sat up and looked around. She was safe. The storm, it had passed. Her father, his face etched with worry, moved closer to the hearth, his eyes searching his wife's. She returned his gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. They had weathered many storms together, both in life and in love, and this, too, would pass. The log in the fireplace shifted, sending sparks spiraling up the chimney. One by one, they drifted off, those sparks like stars fallen to earth, leaving behind the soft glow of embers. The first rays of sunlight, pale and tentative, touched the tops of the trees. A new day had begun, and with it, the promise of spring whispered on the breeze. Outside, the world began to stir. Birdsong filled the air, chasing away the last echoes of the storm. The rabbits, they hopped from their hiding places, their white tails flashing like banners in the morning light. A deer stepped out from the trees, its coat glistening, its eyes wide and alert. It sniffed the air, tasting the freedom of the open meadow. And as the sun climbed higher in the sky, painting the leaves in hues of gold and green, the family emerged from the cabin, blinking against the light. They were battered, bruised, but unbroken. Together they surveyed the damage, their hands working in unison to clear the debris. The storm had tested them, but it had not defeated them. And as they worked, they laughed, their voices carrying on the wind, weaving a tapestry of hope for the days to come. And so, the storm passed, the cabin stood strong, and the family found hope in the promise of spring. May this story remind us that even the longest night will always give way to morning. Close your eyes, rest your heart, and drift into gentle dreams. Good night and sweet dreams.